Good afternoon. As you know, I, as well as other mayors from around the country, have been in conversations since the election about how we respond to the various actions of the new administration. We met in January and held a press conference in Washington, D.C., about 90 of us, standing up again for immigrants and refugees, regardless of their status in our cities. This week, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions told American cities that they are breaking the law and making their communities unsafe. Apparently, the Trump administration, their war on facts has now become a war on cities. And our values of inclusion, of community, our values are the values that we will stand by. Let me be clear about the facts. We are not breaking any laws, and we are prioritizing safety. And let me be clear about the President's executive order. It is violating the law. It is unconstitutional. Today, the City of Seattle filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court against President Trump, Attorney General Sessions, Homeland Security Chief Director John Kelly, and that outlines why the President's order is illegal. First, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that the federal government cannot specify how local governments must go about enforcing federal law. Yet that is exactly what the President's order does. Second, the U.S. Constitution says that the federal government may not coerce local governments by denying them federal dollars. They are not germane if they are not germane to the program in question. Yet that is exactly what the President's order does. Once again, this new administration has decided to bully. But bullying and misstating the facts will not stand in the way of making sure that the laws, the real laws in this country, are enforced. It is particularly galling to hear the Attorney General say that Seattle isn't prioritizing safety. When we welcome immigrants into our community, dedicate resources to helping immigrants on a pathway to citizenship, and warmly integrate immigrant school children into our schools and classrooms, we do this because as a welcoming city, it fosters safety. It's when you marginalize people and drive them away from city services and make them fearful of the police and push them underground that these communities become unsafe, and then the city of Seattle becomes unsafe. The data is clear. Crime rates drop for immigrants' communities, and as those communities grow, those rates continue to drop. In this city's most diverse neighborhood, the most diverse police precinct, the South Precinct, crime dropped 20% in 2015 and an additional 4% in 2016. The Trump administration has created fear among immigrants, and his fear is out of sync with the facts I just stated. I believe Seattle's values are in sync with how we make communities safe. In addition to laying out the facts, our lawsuit is staying true to our values. We value civil rights, we value the courts, and we value the Constitution. This administration has created an atmosphere of anxiety in cities across America and has created chaos in our politics. It is time for cities to stand up and ask the courts to put an end to the anxiety in our communities and the chaos in our system. And with that, I'm going to ask our City Attorney Pete Holmes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an honor to stand here with you, with our fellow council members, with other city officials, to stand and vindicate the rule of law. I held this up before. It's a little bit more shop-worn, and I want to point out Councilmember Juarez has a larger one. So I hope that we will all pull this out and start to study it some more, because it is a reminder that the rule of law truly governs this country. Just a couple of quick points. The mayor has done a fabulous job of describing the theories behind the lawsuit. I want to thank, first off, our outside counsel, the firm Mayor Brown in the District of Columbia, and in particular Andrew Pincus and Charles Rothfeld. They have worked with us constantly shortly after the executive order originally issued, and they have also been trying to help us to address something that has happened since then. It is this incessant saber rattling that, while not adding any content to the executive order, is simply making us less safe. It is, in our office, we have seen domestic violence cases where victims have felt that they need to step away from prosecution. We have to deal with messaging of our police department and what are the requirements and what are not. And it does not help to have the nation's highest law enforcement official misstating the law, pandering to crime and fear, and consequently that's why the action we're taking today is in the best interest of this city as well as other American cities. I would close by adding that this is also a collaborative effort. I have reached out to the interim attorney for the Western District of Washington to let her know that the lawsuit's coming. I've alerted the county prosecutor as well as our state attorney general and the solicitor general for the state. We are all going to be in communication and making sure that we're taking actions that are in our best interest for all of our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Councilmember Gonzalez. Before she comes up, let me acknowledge Councilmember Juarez, who's also here.
I'm actually not going to make any remarks.
Oh, you're not making any remarks?
No.
You were on my run a show. Okay.
Congratulations.
Okay.
You don't have to.
Wait, you're a politician. You have to.
I'm unlike any politician.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm only going to say a few words, and I have my sister Sand with me, my Latina sister. This is really important and emotional for both of us. Lorena and I got here, and there was a time in this country where our grandparents and our parents wouldn't have been, if right now, or being targeted. We now have relatives that are keeping their IDs on them because they have a Latina last name. So for us, it's really emotional, and it's impactful, and it's day-to-day. Now, I read, of course, you know me, I read the brief, but the most important thing I want to say is this, and I could say a lot, but what I want to say is that it should not be, and we should not allow the federal government to use local police and our agencies to act as a federal militia, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying the federal government, disregarding the 10th Amendment, that it's okay that local police, local agencies, anyone who provides services, medical, education, should be able to ask about a person's immigration status and basically be federal police for ICE. And that is unconstitutionally on its face, wrong, and completely against the morality and the humanity we are as people. And so I want to thank our mayor. I want to thank Pete Holmes. I want to thank my sister who's been on the front lines of these kind of issues. And I want to just add one other thing. We actually live this life, and we also have lived this life professionally as lawyers, as community activists, and I can only say that we will continue to fight. We are not going to give up. Thank you.
Again, thank you to the council members. Thank you to Pete Holmes and the City Attorney's Office. Thank you to all the advocates who are here from immigrant rights groups, other organizations, including labor. Thank you for your support to keep Seattle a safe and welcoming city. And finally, I want to thank my attorney, Ian Warner, who has spearheaded a lot of this effort and will be answering your questions along with Pete Holmes. So with that, questions? Yes.
Mayor, how does this work, considering that Seattle has not actually lost any money yet?
Well, so I think what we are responding to, and you're going to see other cities join our efforts in the days and weeks ahead, is basically we're dealing with communities that are really afraid. And we're dealing with a situation where it's very hard to plan budgets when you have inconsistent statements that are threatening our own budgets in our own cities. So the time to act is now. As far as the legal answer, I will offer either Pete or Ian.
It truly is a factual inquiry at this point. We understand that our community are responding in fear to what are clearly incorrect statements of law from the nation's top law enforcement officer. I'd like to just point out one in particular. That was a quote from Attorney General Sessions on Monday when he said, and I quote, "When cities and states refuse to enforce immigration laws, our nation is less safe." That statement is so wrong on so many levels. Number one, local governments do not enforce federal law. We are prohibited from doing so. And moreover, even if we did, given this administration that would like to commandeer our resources and enforce federal law, we would face civil liability, ironically, under federal law. So that's on the legal side. The other practical side, besides the fact that our most threatened communities are finding themselves fearful of approaching law enforcement, of vindicating their own local rights, is the fact that we know, and our law enforcement experts tell us, that this kind of approach makes us less safe. And apparently, Attorney General Sessions has not gotten that message. If you don't have witnesses of and victims of crimes reporting to the police department, we are all less safe. So that's why we need to act now, because of the continual grind of this improper statements from the top, improper statements of law.
How much federal law enforcement grant money do you figure
just 1 second. Let me, and I promise somebody else the next question. I think if you look in news reports from other cities around the country, you're seeing a significant drop in people reporting domestic violence and rape. That's another key reason that we are here to act. Our communities are becoming less safe because of this executive order. Essex.
You seemed combative from the very first day after the election when it came to this issue. Are you spoiling for a fight here? Is it really necessary to file a lawsuit now?
I think it is, and I think the last fact alone is a good reason to file the lawsuit now. You know, this is, the intensity is because I've spent time in classrooms in this city, and I have seen how scared those kids are, that their parents, their aunts and uncles, or they themselves are going to be ripped out of this city. It's personal for me because I knew my grandparents who immigrated to this country. And while it's not well known in the West Coast, they faced discrimination. Their churches were burnt down. Signs were put in windows in New York City where my grandparents lived that said, "No Irish need apply." We've been here before. My husband's parents, and you've heard me say this before, my husband's grandparents and my grandparents came to this country at the same time. My grandparents could be citizens, could vote, and could own property. My husband's grandparents couldn't become citizens, couldn't vote, and couldn't own property until the 1950s. We don't want to go there again. And that's where the intensity comes from personally and as mayor of this city. Okay, you get next.
Federal law enforcement grant money do you figure is at stake here?
Okay.
Let's run that calculation.
Sure.
And how much have you budgeted for this legal effort?
So the estimates is around $10.5 million. And we, as you know, the day of the executive order, I announced that our budget office would be going through an exercise of proposed budget reductions so that we can shift money into any program that is cut, a reprioritization process. That's assuming it stays at that $10 million level.
But you've hired a law firm now, right? How much have you budgeted for this lawsuit?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. It's worth defending people's rights, yes.
Mayor, have we seen a drop in domestic violence and rape reporting that people stop using city resources because of that?
So we're trying to, I had hoped to have that information today. I don't have that information yet. Certainly you've seen the reports that other cities and counties have made. We'll be working with the county to clarify that information, unless someone has it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Attorney, can you just clarify what exactly these documents are seeking? I know that, Mayor, during your State of the City address, you talked about trying to get documents from the federal government. Can you clarify
Sure.
and narrow exactly, since we don't have these documents in front of us?
It's not clear. We want to be sure we understand their intent, and we want to ensure that their intent is actually under the law. And there's been a lot of confusion out of this administration. So we're trying to identify information that could affect this city. I don't know if either the city attorney or Ian want to add anything.
Just to fill in two of the mayor's last answers. First is that our team has passed out a budget sheet with updated dollars that break down what federal funding we believe to be at risk at this time. That's reflected in the complaint put together by Mayor Brown. I just wanted to note that. Pete?
And I should
Go
add,
to the microphone.
Mayor Brown is providing its services pro bono. They felt that strongly about this issue, and that's I neglected to say that earlier, but that's an important point to remember, and it's also part of the gratitude we feel toward them. Their expertise is being provided at no cost. My office has a team supporting it as well, but it's lawyers that have all very much wanted to be involved in this effort.
In the original executive order, I believe it mentioned all federal funding would be withheld for cities that were found to be non-compliant. In Jeff Sessions' remarks on Monday, he only mentioned two specific grant programs, the Department of Justice.
Right.
Is your sense that they're at all backtracking on the all federal money?
So, again, you hear different things from different members of the administration. Certainly, there's more of a nexus between Department of Justice grants, although I would say things like grants helping us with child sex trafficking is not connected to immigration. But there is more of a nexus there, so maybe it's an attempt for them to get clear. But again, we continue to hear conflicting information out of there.
Mayor Murray, could you talk about the goal of this lawsuit? Is the goal, like with the travel ban executive order, to get this order struck down? You know, we heard the AG talk about the whack-a-mole scenario that happens where they come back with a different executive order. What is the goal of this lawsuit?
The goal of this lawsuit is to have the courts declare that the executive order is unconstitutional, is not lawful, is not under the rule of law, that they cannot punish cities, and they cannot force our local police officials to be involved in federal immigration activities. That's what we're seeking from the courts.
Previously, I know Attorney Holmes had asked for clarification on various definitions. Is that something you're still aiming for?
You bet. We've received responses to all of the FOIA requests, but not full responses. In other words, the equivalent, for instance, of 5-day notices from state agencies under our Public Records Act. We've received some rulings on our request to provide documents free of charge. But the point is, Liz, that we're trying to nail down what these terms that are being loosely bandied about to great harm in our communities. Sanctuary city, what do these terms mean when they're trying to link them to specific punishments, that is, the withholding of federal funds? So we're trying to make sure that we hold them accountable, define your terms, number one. And then number two, instead of the press conferences from Washington, instead of the tweets from the White House, we want to have a sober statement of the law that can be reassuring to the communities that this is still the rule of law and it's still a nation of laws.
Did you make this move today because of what the Attorney General said on Monday?
Well, let me reiterate. Beginning after the election, the U.S. Conference of Mayors hired a law firm to do an analysis of whether we would be under the rule of law in being a welcoming city, sometimes called a sanctuary city. We met in January, as I said, and we have been in discussions. I was in Providence meeting with the mayor of Rhode Island, the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, who is one of the chairs of our immigrant and refugee group in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I met with the mayor of New York and the mayor of Jersey City. There's a series of activities that mayors are ready to take based on the executive order itself.
One more question. Maybe a question for Pete, but strategy-wise, Santa Clara County and San Francisco County, I believe, have both filed lawsuits similar to this. Those cases have now been joined together in California. There's a briefing schedule already. Where does your lawsuit play in nationally, and you hope to move this up ahead of schedule and get a TRO? What's your hope strategically?
We're not asking for a TRO. We certainly are tracking those lawsuits. Those lawsuits, you should keep in mind, are somewhat different in the relief they're asking because they actually operate jails, and the ICE detainer requests more clearly comes into play directly on their operations day to day. But we have filed supporting briefs as amicus in those cases as well, and we are tracking those in similar cases across the country, making sure that we try to coordinate and understand how the law is evolving.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
We'll be handing out a couple of documents on budget and a background on lawsuit.
Thank you, Lorena. Thanks. Thanks.
I always forget that I'm still a politician.